Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly podcast about the latest and greatest in Ultimate Frisbee. I am the editor of Ultiworld, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me, Ultiworld senior editor Keith Rayner, live on YouTube every week, noon Eastern on Tuesdays. We are back. We got a lot to do today because it is our college preview show. Keith, I know you're hyped. I know you're coaching. You're fired up. You're in the D3 division for the first time. We got college nationals locations to talk about. It's all happening.
The college season is here. Right? There wasn't much play to speak of yet, but this weekend coming is going to launch us into gear. We're going to see a bunch of ranked teams play. It should be a pretty exciting weekend. I'm definitely hyped up to dig into it. I'm anxious about making my picks at the end of this. If we're going to sit here and I don't know if we're going to end up doing our semis, but it's tough to pick exactly what to expect by the end of the season, but that's all the more reason to be excited about it.
I think it does feel like we have a year where there's a lot of uncertainty and kind of an open landscape right now. I think you can pretty confidently pick, 5 to 8 teams that one of those teams will win nationals, but it doesn't feel like there's an obvious slam dunk favorite in any division. I mean, we had a lot of internal debate over even who should be preseason ranked number 1, and that's not usually the case. Really quick, let's just talk about college nationals, where it's going to be. Burlington, Washington. It's about 90 minutes north of Seattle. D3 and D1 will be at the same field site. It's been a while since we've done that. I think we had the Milwaukee double up. Was that the first spring nationals after COVID? Like 2022, I guess. I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
So this is a rarity, but a nice one. It's really nice to be able to have just one place. And from what I've heard from the folks in Washington, if it's not raining, it'll be beautiful. So we'll take that.
I've heard that the fields themselves are great. I thought somebody in our Discord said that they just thought this was the standard because they played there in their youth, and then they went to another tournament and were like, oh wait.
It turns out if you're somewhere where there's just copious amounts of rain, you can have really nice fields. So yeah, I mean, I know it took them a long time to get it announced. I think there was basically a holdup on the business side about the D3 fields. And so they really, I think D1 was known to be in Burlington for like a couple of months. So this is kind of an open secret, honestly. So I think some folks definitely knew, and all the Dis Northwest folks have been sitting on this for quite some time. So should be good. Looking forward. It's been a long time, Keith, since we've had a Pacific Northwest College Nationals, and it's been a really long time, honestly, like 20 years since we've had a West Coast Nationals in the spring. We obviously did the Norco California thing in the Winter Nationals of 2021, but that was kind of like its own exclusive thing. And by the way, I'm really sorry. My camera is it's a disaster right now. My new camera arrives today. So by this time next week, I should be back and good to go. Sorry, folks.
We're going to go into the break and Charlie's going to come back looking good.
I hope so. That'd be great. So it's cool. It's cool to have nationals feeling like it's moving around again.
It is. I know that there are some folks for whom this is not great news. It's far away if you're on the East Coast. It may be expensive where you're flying from. I saw some people say, why don't we just keep it in the middle of the country, because then it's more accessible for everybody. But I don't actually think that's true based on the way that airline logistics work when you're at cities where there isn't necessarily an airport. I also have been told that the airport is about 2 hours away from the fields here. So teams should factor that into their travel. It's not going to be super convenient for Ultiworld potentially. Sometimes we have people leaving, during like finance. It can be a bit of a rush, but I think that it's natural that it should move around. We should keep continuing to put it in other locations. For some teams, this is going to put it in driving distance. For teams that often have to fly, I know it's going to feel this year like it's the West year, especially when we're starting to talk about the contenders, the top teams, the top regions. It's a big year for the West. Nationals is now in the West. I know there are people who are like, it stinks, especially in the women's division. All the elite tournaments feel like they're out west. So a bunch of California teams and the nearby states basically never have to go anywhere. They just drive up and down the coast and it's fine, or they don't have to travel the same way the East Coast teams do. But that's just the way the cookie crumbles. I think it's fine to move nationals around. In fact, I think it's good. So I'm glad that we're gonna try a new thing. And this is someone who is hoping to compete at nationals, and we will be going as basically as far away as possible to get to Washington. We'll have some Seattle people on the team, so maybe that'll help. But it is what it is, and I'm not too bothered by it.
How many teams will stay in Seattle with like parents? There's a lot of Frisbee people from Seattle, as we know, like, but then you're choosing to drive every day. Some teams will do it. It might be worth it. Burlington, it's a small area. There's not a lot of like hotels and housing around. That is going to be the big downside, is like, how does it absorb all of these people? Presumably USAU
Especially
is
finding
lucked
out
up
late,
there.
right?
Yeah. Hotel blocks and stuff should all be taken care of, but I just don't know. Like, having booked an Airbnb, it was not easy. And, we're doing it way before most teams are. So we'll see what happens. I am excited though to be in a part, like, this is like the Frisbee richest like region of the United States. So it's cool that we get to have nationals there once in a while. It's time for our trivia question of the week.
All right, this week's trivia question of the week. We are keeping it simple because I feel like sometimes we forget about this stuff. Charlie, trivia question of the week. In the men's and women's divisions, who were the first college champions? I feel like this is something
Oh
all
no.
college Frisbee fans should learn, but is easily forgotten. So, do you think you can give me the first men's division and women's division champions in college ultimate history?
What can you just I need a little hint, a small hint. What year was the first college nationals?
The first college nationals in let me make sure I get the exactly the right dates here. Your first college nationals in the women's division wasn't until 87. I think the men's was 84. Yeah. First men's division championship was in 84, and the first women's division championship was in 87.
Okay. So
I,
I'm gonna go black
do you
tie
want
for the men.
okay.
And for the women, I'm gonna go some California school. Um I don't think it was UCSB though. I'll go Stanford.
I'm those are not correct. I will say
That's
neither of these programs these programs would be long shots to make nationals this year. I think you would be shocked if these teams made nationals this year in their respective divisions. Give you one more shot out of here.
Stanford men and UCSB women. I'll just switch up.
Well, I just told you that it would be a shock to make nationals.
Oh, you're right. Oh, I don't know why I was saying UCSB women. That's stupid. Stupid guess. Stupid guess.
So as you and Jacob in the chat both got, it is Stanford in the men's division. Blood the first men's division champion. So you had Stanford in the wrong division, but you were close. The women's division. This is a fun one for me because they actually had some relation. They have some relationship with that championship team, the current team. Like they've communicated with them, which I think is really cool. It's Kansas. Kansas won the first women's division title. And that's like a thing
Ah,
that'll always be a part of the Betty program.
I
I
think I've
think you knew
heard
this
this
somewhere in
fact.
your.
I did. Like, I've heard this fact like five times, and I've never committed it to memory. But this will be the time that I remember forever, Keith. Stanford men, Kansas women.
Everybody out there, file that one away. Remember your history.
Awesome. All right. Well, it's time to get into our college preview. We got so much to talk about. First thing I want to discuss is the streaming schedule. So we kick things off this weekend with the Santa Barbara invite. And if you're looking for our streaming schedule, it's posted to our social media. It's actually pinned on our Insta page right now. So if you head over to Multi World Instagram, you can check it out. And look at that. It's up on the screen. We love to see it. Florida warm up is coming up. A little bit of piece of news. This says location Tampa, Florida, but maybe not. The tournament was told that they were having their fields revoked like sometime within the last couple of weeks by the university because they're doing some construction. So they're looking for a new field site that's not been determined, and we are 10 days from the tournament. So a little bit of a stressful situation for the teams involved. They might be going to Gainesville to play at University of Florida campus. They might be playing in St. Petersburg, kind of a TBD situation. Then we'll have the President's Day invite, Queen City tune-up, the kind of big mid-February, early majors. Then we get to March. We've got Smoky Mountain invite and Stanford invite women's division, both on the same weekend, March 1st and 2nd. Women's Northwest Challenge later in March, and then Easterns alongside D3 Easterns at the same location in Wilmington at the end of the month. Wrap things up in the men's division. And then, of course, we'll have regionals and nationals coverage coming your way. This is all subject to change. We may add some tournaments here and there, but that is the primary streaming schedule. And Keith, it starts this weekend in Santa Barbara. And with a big West Coast year, it feels like more appointment viewing than ever to tune into SBI.
Yeah, it's a great debut set with SBI. I'm excited to see where it is and where teams are at, I should say. We'll take a look at the team list. I don't think we have a format. We'll later in the show we'll take our look at the team list and try and prognosticate our way through it. I know in the chat I've got a couple questions about no ECI this year. ECI, a new tournament last year that popped up over in Delaware, where my team will actually is planning to attend this year. Unfortunately, Northwest Challenge kind of ate ECI's lunch a little bit, taking UNC and Vermont, who were the big headliners at ECI last year. They will be attending Northwest Challenge this year, which took away some of the cachet of the elite levels of the tournament. I still think it'll be an important tournament potentially for bids, although maybe not. If all the bids are going to be out west, maybe it won't matter what happens over at ECI, at least in D1 women's. But it still should be a good tournament. But it didn't make the streaming schedule with the top teams not attending.
I'd say it's one of the TBD events. We'll wait to see full team lists, and we'll wait to see how the season progresses. It's possible that it ends up being more interesting than we anticipate. But indeed, the headline teams are all going to be at Northwest Challenge. I mean, that's going to be like mini nationals for sure. We might have like all of the top 10 at that tournament. Seems very possible. So that is the streaming schedule. Keep an eye on it and make sure to get your subscription all set up for this weekend. All the games will be available to standard and all access subscribers. And you'll also get to join the Ulti World Discord and keep up with all things Ultimate. It's the best place to talk Ultimate online. Keith, let's talk about some contenders. We got the power rankings out, and we got a lot of great teams ready to go. Top 5 were just revealed for both D1 and D3. You want to run them down for us, Keith?
Yeah, let's go through it. Starting in the D1 women's division, our top 5 going into the year at number 1, Vermont, followed by Colorado, UNC, UBC, and Oregon. Top 5 in the Division 1 women's. In the D1 men's division, Oregon at the top spot going into the year. Charlie and I will probably talk about this. UNC up at number 2, SLO at 3, Colorado at 4, and UMass at 5. Down in D3 women's division, Carleton Eclipse, the number 1 team coming into the year. And then 2 teams all from that same region, St. Olaf and McAllister at 2 and 3. Haverford and Bryn Mawr at 4, and Wesleyan at 5. Shout out. And D3 men's division, OC Oklahoma Christian at the top spot. Davenport at number 2. That's the scholarship schools, already reigning supreme in our preseason rankings, followed by Middlebury, Whitman, and Williams. So those are your top 5s, and you can see the full top 25s, as well as some thoughts on each team going into the season on ultiworld.com right now.
It's going to be exciting. I want to go ahead and let's just take a look at the top 25 teams in the women's D1 division. We'll start there and take a look at the overall list from 1 to 25. And there it is. As Keith already read off the top 5, and we can see the rest. Keith, I think what would be fun to do right now is just talk about like where are the cutoffs here? Like what are the tiers of teams? Who's in the championship contending tier in your mind? How far down do you go and still have teams that you feel like are realistic title winners? I have an answer.
In the women's division, I feel like I'm at 8 right now. I feel like when I get to 8 is where I run out of teams I think have a shot at it. Maybe you could subdivide that first tier into the first 4 and the second 4, but I still think going into the year, I think I'm at 8 teams deep with a real shot at winning a title. I do think Tufts could be that good despite some of their losses. A lot of these teams have some key losses. In fact, I think all of them have some big name players that are coming back, probably with the exception of Oregon. I think Oregon maybe is unscathed on that front, but I think these are all really strong programs. I mean, if we end up with all 8 in quarters, that's going to be ridiculous. I struggle to imagine that quite lining up, but these are 8 teams that you're very familiar with that have been quarters and semis contenders and even title contenders in the past. But I think that's where I draw my line right now.
I just I'm wondering whether I want to go to 6 or 7. Do I believe in Stanford? I I have to because of the coaching every year and the player development that they've had. I would have been so much more in on Stanford if they were going to be 100% healthy, but they're not. So I'm just not sure. I think I say it's only 6 deep, Keith. I think it's Vermont to Carleton for me. Um, but I don't. I like that you think that it can go 8 deep. I think that's a great sign for what kind of a season we might have.
I mean, maybe I'm being overly optimistic. Maybe I'm hoping for the best. But Stanford recruits well. They're well coached. Harper Bear's back this year. They're going to have a lot of strong returners this year, even though they are without Macy Volbrecht, who kind of emerged as a star for them last year. But I also think they showed that they have the resilience and the depth to play. Even Esther Philippek, who you mentioned is not going to be, it may not be able to compete with the team at all this year, had a tough run at the end of nationals, and the team was still strong and showed that they can be resilient with their depth and their system. So I give them a lot of credit for that.
I will note 15 of the top 20 teams are from the Western U.S. And that tells you what kind of strength we're expecting to see. I mean, the bid question is its own conversation. Where do you think that? I guess let me set a line. Quarterfinalists type teams. Like I think you could go a little deeper for semis teams. Like I certainly wouldn't shock me if we saw a Stanford or a Tufts get into semis. I think my semis cutoff is probably around 10. And then my quarters cutoff is probably a little deeper than that. Maybe as far down as like 16. I could see a chance of getting into quarters. Is that too far down?
Maybe. I think you're right around the area though, because I'm a Penn believer as going into the season. And I don't want to write off particularly that kind of that Southwest, that California group of Santa Cruz, Davis, and Slow. I don't know what the ceiling is on those teams. So I don't really want to write them off as potential quarters teams. But the top part of this group is so strong that I have trouble imagining, getting to 8 teams from outside of this group, it's because of how strong I think that my title contender group goes so deep. That's like, how many of those teams can I realistically expect to not even make quarters? One, two out of my title contenders. So there's just not a lot of slots. And then you got to contend with UCSD and Washington and Michigan and Penn, etc.
All right. I want to do a couple of exercises here before we move on to the next division. Um, Outside of the top 15, give me a team that you think is going to do better than expected and have a good year. That you can define that how you want. Generally, you're not going to be looking
Yeah,
at a team like this to make quarters or semis, but maybe make a run of the bracket or surprise finish high in their region or something like that.
I think those California teams I mentioned are the low hanging fruit for that. But I have so much trouble picking which one that's going to be. Uh, I think a team that we have underranked here is Northeastern. I think that
Mm.
Northeastern can outperform this. Elise Friedman is really talented. They have 3 or 4 players who I think are all region caliber players in a tough region where they've got 2 other top 8 teams. I think that they're going to prove to be competitive and show some programmatic strength and outperform this a little bit. Maybe give a shot at getting a strike bid to the weary eastern part of the country. But tough competition ahead of them.
Let me just note real quick. SBI, the field, it is so stacked. Like it's almost hard to go through. The order of team list that I have is not in order of teams in the power rankings, but teams that are going to be there: Colorado, UBC, Oregon, Carleton, Stanford. Uh, so that's all inside the top 10. Of course, UC San Diego, Washington. Uh, I think Western is not going, right? No,
No
no
Western.
Western, but BYU, Santa Barbara, Utah, UVic, Santa Cruz, Davis, Slow, and I think that's it. But man, that's stacked. Like those teams are all in the top 20.
Yeah,
That's the
I
field for
mean it's
SBI. Like we are kicking it off
it's wild.
crazy this year. Yeah. Um, so for me, a team outside the top 15 that I would say like keep an eye on. Um, I kind of want to stump for. I, I have a hard time, and this was a debate internally too. Like, which of these Georgia teams is it? Georgia coming in at number 24, Georgia Tech coming up from number 25. I think whoever emerges from those two teams. So I'm kind of chickening out here might end up being better than we think. Like not just a borderline happy to be their team at nationals, but a team that gets wins. So I like that there's like a little bit of a rivalry there. They're going to push each other, and I think we could see some strength out of the Southeast from whoever emerges as the number one team.
That would be a welcome change. The Southeast has been in a throes of despair as of late.
All right. Let's move on to D3 women's. Do we have that? I think we should have that. And there it is. So Keith already ran down the top 5. Same question here for you, Keith. We've got the last year's national champion coming in at number 7 in the power rankings preseason for 2025. Where's your cutoff for title contenders in an sort of more volatile division here in D3?
Yeah, it's super hard to know exactly what to make of the division. I feel like your top like 3 or maybe in a class of their own, but I think I could probably talk myself into down to like 8. Uh but like Carlton is not a runaway favorite, but I think if realistically I'm mostly looking at the top 3. Maybe I could build out to 5, but it's even harder to have any. It's so hard to have clear cutoffs in D3. So it's extra difficult, even harder than it is in D1.
Yeah. What gives you a sense of those top 3 separating?
Lots of experience. This has been, with the exception of I guess McAllister, Carlton and St. Olaf are two teams that have been in semifinals like basically year in and year out, and that just going to add strength to your team. They both have good returners, even if they have a couple of losses. Both teams are going to have enough to power them. And McAllister's got the clearly effect. I actually think that we're maybe underselling the rest of their roster. I think they have some potential to really develop, and they have some good returners to go with clearly. But I think McAllister, after the lessons of last year, their first real breakout season, they came from like out of nowhere basically to being one of the power teams in the division. I think that year two, with things a lot more set in, they're going to show up to nationals a lot stronger.
Should be an interesting season in D3. I love to see continuing more crossover, play during the season. Looking forward to seeing how it shakes out. Um, let's go to D3 men's. Take a look at what we've got there. I think it's so interesting that we've already gotten to the point where the top two teams in the power rankings are the two schools in really all of Ultimate that are like being serious about recruiting and offering scholarships. I don't know that the same approach would work in Division 1. Although I'm underestimating. Like I just think I wouldn't have guessed that this is how this would have worked out when this was initially announced by Oklahoma Christian a few years ago. But man, I mean, it's like completely changed the look of the division.
It happened fast, right? And
I mean,
there were
who
those two
even knew the
warned that
word
it would.
Davenport University was not a school that people were talking about at all. And now
If
they
you
might
told
win the
me,
national championship.
if you told me that they were founded the year that the Ultimate Team started, like I probably believe you. You know, like that did the school even exist? I don't know. But for folks who are worried that it could warp the division, it does feel a little OP right now, right? Like every year they bring in top talent. They bring in, they're bringing in players who are graduating from other D3 schools, like all American level players. They're bringing in players from other countries, which no school in the U.S. is doing outside of these groups. Really, it is really stacked up very quickly for them, and they both have really impressive incoming groups of talent. Whether you're talking about Colin Hill or Luke Norby, who's going to be a rookie at OC, he could be a centerpiece for years to come. A player who has impressed me in back-to-back years at YCCs. Was a U20 player. I mean, I think he's going to be one of the best rookies in all of college ultimate, D1 or D3. There's a ton of talent going into these teams. And I think the rest of the division is probably going to start to feel a little resentful about it soon, if they aren't already.
I still think you can go down to probably just 4 teams here, but I still think it's like not clearly going to be one of those top 2 teams that wins. I mean, we've had high expectations for Oklahoma Christian in the past, and they've failed to make nationals a couple of years ago. So it's not like anything's guaranteed. But I do think that you're going to be looking at one of those top 4 teams walking away with the hardware at the end of the season.
I am in this. I'm at the same cutoff. I'm willing to give Kai Kirsch and Whitman some benefit of the doubt, but it feels like Williams lost so much
It's too
from last
much.
year's team. Yeah, a
It's
little
too
too
hard
much
to
to overcome.
reload.
D3
Yeah.
is active in the chat right now. There's shout outs for Cedarville and Elon down at 12, Cedarville at 22. And Jacob says we are in fact resentful, although he's being a little cheeky.
I understand it, but it's going to be target on the back time for those teams at tournaments. That's for sure. But the thing is, like,
do you think
in D3,
is USAU going to step in at all? Do you think it's a real potential problem?
why would they step in? This is This is exactly what you want to see if you're USAU. If other schools feel like they care about this and they want to be more competitive, then they need to step up. If alumni from Middlebury are like, this is BS, like we should be winning more titles, okay, then throw money at it. Like this is what you want to see. This isn't a bad thing. I mean, people being able to
NIL money,
fund their
baby.
education through Frisbee is a good thing, not a bad thing. Let's get rid of the 6th years first, please.
And talent in the division. I mean, more talent means higher quality play.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I wanna see D3 nationals start to have more competitive games in, like, quarters and, earlier. Like, for the top teams, we're kinda just waiting to get to semis to see those big, big games, and as the talent continues to grow at the top of the division, you're gonna start to see more interesting games deeper in the bracket, and that's a great thing. Um, alright, let's go do D1 men's and take a look at the top 25. Oregon coming in at number 1. This was a big point of contention. Who should be number 1, Oregon or UNC? There was a lot of disagreement even among staff. Keith, where did you land? Were you an Oregon guy or a UNC guy for number 1 in the power rankings?
Um, I started out on UNC. I think I may have been convinced though through our debate process that it should be Oregon. My main argument for UNC was we've seen it. It's proven, right? But it's if there's a time to go out and we'll have time to do that during the year. During the regular season, we will be focused on what teams have done. But no team has won anything yet. Nobody's even won a game. So maybe it's not the time to think, "Oh, what's your resume look like?" Like let's look at the talent, let's look at the direction the teams are going. I was big on Oregon last year. Uh the talent is fantastic. It is I know I joked previously about that the Micah Glass love is all time high. The stock is incredibly high, but they are super deep. I mean, there are like 10, 12 really good dudes on this Oregon team. So it is not a Micah Glass centric take. When you're getting write ups and we're not talking about Raquan Atkins and Chandra Boyd Flegel and Aaron Kaplan, like they are good. So I think I came around to the idea that Oregon should be number one.
Yeah. I think the only way you really wanna stick with UNC is if you're like, the, on-field refs are gonna call a game for them again, you know? It's like Kansas City Chiefs out there.
Well, I mean, it also helps to have maybe the best player, right? Ben Dameron could easily
Yeah.
be the. I'm sure that going back to Michael Glass, there will be people who after his club season are like, I'm not sure Ben Dameron's the best player, and there are other contenders for that spot. But between the programmatic success of Darkside, like the know how about winning, they also are still getting good recruits. They still have a lot of young talent. Josh Singleton is probably ready to really break out into his own this year. There's definitely a case for Darkside.
Emph in the chat says, "Oregon beat UNC last year. They were robbed." A lot of conversation about that. I mean, that's gonna be grudge match automatic, right? Like, when these teams meet, at some point, I feel like I really hope we see them play in the regular season. I don't think that's any guarantee. Um, I'm not sure if I've seen team lists for the late tournaments, but, will Oregon go
I
to
think
Easterns,
they're
for
I think they're
instance?
both slated to be at SMI. I think
At SMI, okay.
maybe it's
That'd
Oregon
be
State.
huge. I
Maybe
mean,
I'm Oregon State. I'm thinking of.
there's a great chance, if they are at the same tournament that they will play at some point in, semis or finals. You wanna see that storyline get built up more because it's gonna be Oregon's be out for blood. Uh, and as they should be, that really was it was a brutal sequence for them to lose that game, with that call and just how that shook out at the end, but, both really, really good
Calls
teams.
2 calls.
How how much further down do you feel like the the line goes for championship contenders?
I think it stops at the top 5 for me. As much as I believe in this Carlton team, but I think I can only speak to them to go to semis. I could see them beating out one of these teams above them to make semis. But I don't know. Championship feels like a stretch for me. So I think I can go to the top 5. And that's giving UMass that's weighing the talent way more than what we've seen from UMass, which is generally a team that underperforms its talent, but the talent is considerable.
Losing Jonas Dang Osborne is just brutal, man. I really like their chances to have a big push with their veteran crew at this point. I think they're still gonna be good, but I really needed to see them do more than, finish tied for ninth at nationals last year. If I really wanted to
Yep.
believe that they were going to make a run this year. Um, Mama Bird is really interesting. Is Toby Brooks enough? I mean, they have plenty of talent. I'm not convinced they have quite enough to win nationals, but they could. They could. To me, that's where the cutoff is, though. I don't think I put UMass in the same list. I think it's the top four that have the shot. Slow, just like depth and coaching. I'm always going to like their chances. What a game last year to stand tall against Darkside. And what we don't have this year is a team like Brown where the skill is so concentrated in like a couple of players that they can just sort of run an offense through those individual players. Like it feels a little more balanced. We could see a team end up playing like that. I won't be shocked if UNC ends up feeling a little bit like that at times. They looked a little thin when we saw them in the fall, and they were missing some of their top guys, but like they're not nearly as deep, I think, as they have been in the past. They're going to be relying more on those top players. So maybe we see an offense that looks more like what we saw from Brown last year. But I'm just it's gonna be a really interesting season. I think we're not gonna have, and I hope we have better weather at nationals so that it doesn't feel like the sloppy, rainy muck is what determines winners. I think if you reran last year's nationals a bunch of times with different conditions, we might have had totally different winners in every simulation.
Yeah, I get what you're saying about UMass to respond to that. I mean, but if we can get a healthy Wyatt Kelman season, I mean,
That's true.
you got a podium candidate at the front. They've had someone on the Rhodium, the Rookie of
And
the
they
Year
always
podium,
recruit.
for like 3 or 4 straight years. They've
They'll
got one
do
of
it
the best
again.
recruiting classes again coming in this year, including
You bet.
some WJUC talent, some national team talent. I mean, this team is crazy deep. I think they're going to prove to be the deepest team in the country, and maybe that depends on how you measure it. They may not have a better top 14 than Oregon, but or I think they'll have a better top 20, top 22. Now maybe there's like, how do you leverage that? You can't play 22 players all the time, but they've run deep at nationals before in semis. So I think it's possible they're going to they have some nice coaching continuity, and they're going to have strong coaching. I think UMass has some chops, and it makes me sad to cut off Carlton in a way because I'm such a Declan Miller stan, as well
They
as Axel Olsen. But another year of seasoning.
Can you trust the rookies to deliver at the highest level at nationals? That's really the question. Because they have the talent. It's just, for me, it's whether they have all of the other things to be ready to win now. I'm not sure they're going to be quite ready for it. College Ultimate's a different game than high school.
I don't know. Nate
But
DeMorgan looks ready. I mean, he looks ready
I,
at Club
I hear
Nationals,
you.
right? Like,
I hear you. Remember, he didn't even make the U20 team at first. Nonsense. All right. Where's your semis cut off? It feels like it's still a little top heavy this year, you know?
yeah.
Like, is Penn State making semis? They're in the top 10, but I don't think I see it.
I'm like kind of. I think Oregon State might be the last. I think Oregon State should be getting a lot of hype. I mean, I guess they are as a top 10 team, but they looked a little wonky at nationals last year. Like I was a little disappointed with them, but it's so easy to fall in love with the talent. They have another strong recruiting class this year. Maybe they need another year of seasoning, but they're like a dark horse semis team. I think. I think we might be sleeping. There may be teams below them. I think we might be sleeping
I
on
was just gonna
Minnesota,
say, like,
Michigan,
Georgia,
Georgia.
even Wash U. Wash U could have a
There's a
great
lot of
year.
Wash U hype. A lot of vets on Wash U.
Aaron Bartlett with Michigan Magnum. I mean, there's
Yeah.
some good players lurking out there on some of these teams that are a little bit further down. We could see these rankings shake up quite a bit heading into the year, no doubt. And like Texas, I feel like Texas is too low. If I'm going to have
Well,
some nitpicks with the preseason rankings,
I think we didn't find out until after we decided the rankings that I don't know if this
John
was known
Clyde
by
back.
everybody else, but I didn't know that John Clyde was back this year.
Yeah.
That's kind of a difference making factor. I think they probably push up
We
towards
got
the back end of the top 10.
Xavier Fuzat Revenge Tour
Oh
along
yeah.
with John Clyde, Jake Worthington, Aaron Barcio. Like they should be really good. And
Owen
they
Smith.
finished ninth at nationals last year, and we have them 15th. And like, yeah, I feel like in my mind they're a top 10 team coming into the year.
To me they're right around that Oregon State, Penn State line, I think.
Who's a team outside the top 15 that you're going to stump for?
Um, huh. Uh, where do we had? I think we had Michigan just inside Michigan and Minnesota. Those were two teams that like just inside that line.
Yeah, you got Cal,
Maybe
Washington, Victoria, Santa Cruz, Brown, Georgia Tech, Northeastern, Utah Valley, and Ottawa.
yeah. I mean, I think it's easy to get excited about like that Utah group after what we saw from them last year. Uh, but I think I'm more likely to talk myself into Santa Cruz or I'm not gonna talk myself into Washington. I'm not doing that. Washington is they got to earn the trust. They're in the NC State. I've long joked that Washington and NC State are just like opposite coast cousins, and this is they have to make me believe. They need to come in and make me believe. Uh, so I think the Slugs is who I would sub for.
It's a great
Jack
pick.
McGinnis in the chat says I should pick Northeastern, but uh, Peter Borth is good. That's true.
But that's what I'm saying. A bunch of these teams in this range have someone on their team who is really good. Cal with Dexter
Yeah.
Glyburn, Northeastern with Peter Borth, like Utah Valley with Porter Euler. Like it's hard to say whether teams are going to have. You really need the right mix of complementary pieces and the right coaching to realize the potential, but it's definitely possible. Give me Georgia Tech, Grossbusters, baby.
You
Come
sucker.
on.
I knew you were gonna fall.
I'm not a sucker. These dudes are already there.
No,
They
I
are
know.
already that good.
And
They're going to be
they
cooking.
didn't look like
Sam Grossberg will
it did
be
not look
a
like Nick Lance
top 20 player in
and
college.
yeah, it didn't look like the Nick Lance experience, when they were like it was just Nick Lance and Jay Clark and a bunch of guys. It didn't quite feel like that watching them at CCC. I think they're better than that. I know there's going to be the Georgia Tech hype. I think I'm being resistant to it just because it's so trendy right now. But like why should we be talking about Western Washington? They got the Hines brothers. Hines brothers
Yeah, we should.
the Ghostbusters. You know what I'm saying? Like they're not even top 25, and they have a great recruiting class. They have one of my top ranked recruiting classes when I went through Western Washington.
So why
So
aren't you on the hype train? Why aren't they in the top
no,
25?
I am. I only got to pick one team, but there is
Ottawa.
Northwest is going to be crazy.
Get this
Northwest
Metro East out of here, bro.
Do not hate on Marty Gallant at Ottawa, bro. Don't do it.
Listen,
Metro East is still here. Cornell in the women's division, man. They're going to fight in the top 25.
Max Charles says it's not hipster to doubt Georgia Tech. It's not hipster, Keith. You're not cool.
I feel like Georgia Tech has
by
also had some
fading the hype.
epic regionals choke jobs too. So
We've already mentioned some of the names, the big names, but player of the year chatter. Where are you going? I mean, let's be honest. A lot of times you have to have a team that gets at least to semis if you want to win player of the year. That's always going to push things towards the players at the top of the rankings. Ben Dameron for UNC, Micah Glass for Oregon, stuff like that. But as we just mentioned, there are so many really talented players on teams that are not as strong. Could one of those teams make a run? I should say players make a run to a podium candidacy.
I mean, yeah, I think the guys on your top 5 teams are pretty obvious in the men's division. Like you're talking Glass, Dameron, Anton Orm after how he played last year and during the club season, Toby Brooks and Wyatt Kelman. Those are the star of each of those teams. But when you go down the list, like is there that dark horse team that you could talk yourself into? Carleton, I think it's clearly Declan Miller that you're thinking about in that group. But as you get into that next crop of teams, like, is there someone you feel convinced by? I don't know. Uh,
Tristan Yarder's layout catch from CCC's been viewed like 50 million times on Instagram. So
'Cause he doesn't lift
he's
his
got the
knees while he's
media
running.
buzz. That was crazy.
That's what did it for him.
But
Aaron
I mean, look,
Bartlett talking
Aiden
about, like,
Downey
that
for
that
Georgia. Like
mhm.
we already talked about the Texas guys. You said Bartlett for Michigan. Absolutely. I just think that like there's a lot of strong players. Could be a really interesting season. I think it's possible you have a team that like gets bounced at nationals and doesn't make the bracket have the podium on their team. It's possible, and it's extremely rare.
I think it's more likely that you'll see, like, obviously, this is kind of obvious. I think that I could see somebody like that making the top 3. I don't think I could see somebody winning it. There's just gonna be too many
Uh,
good candidates at the top.
how about on the women's side? Who's your podium shortlist right now?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's a little harder, I feel like, to draw out the clear distinctions in the top teams. Are you gonna look at Emily Posey or Caroline Stone? Me, I'm a stone. I'm a stoner. I'm a Caroline Stoner. Yeah, whatever. I'm supporting Caroline Stone. Chloe Phillips, I think, will be a clear candidate for Quandary. Although Faye Burdick was awesome last year, and they're going to be good. They're going to be really good and deep. UNC Erica Birdsong will be your top candidate. But is it a return Madison Ong, or is it Mika Kurahashi that we're talking about from UBC? Is it gonna can Cyrus Lakefield or Miko Magnet take over from Trout Waybright? I mean, not they're actually taking over for each other, but
The
you'll
depth
start to see them.
the depth of top talent makes the podium conversation more challenging
It
because
does.
these top
It
teams
it
have
do- it's
multiple really strong players.
Yeah, it makes it harder to get that singular focus. I feel like Naomi Fina broke out for Carlton last year, in a way that was very noticeable. Leah Schwartz, Emily Kemp, the duo at Tufts. I think that you're going to struggle
Tori
to get
Gray
way
at
beyond this.
UCSD.
Maybe Tori. I was just going to say maybe Tori Gray, but maybe Kat McGuire at Michigan if they go on to have a big year. That's a player who I think really stands out on their team. Maybe Devin Quinn at UCSB. Uh, but that's really the list, I think, in my mind. That kind of group.
It's going to be a fascinating season. Um, let's talk just like big picture storylines. So like if you're tuning in and you're like, this is getting too technical, well, we're gonna go big, we're gonna go wide. What are the big storylines in D1 women's? We're getting ready for SBI. It's gonna be a packed field. We know we have a lot of number one off the top, West Coast strength. We're gonna see multiple strength bids heading to the Northwest and the Southwest. The question is just how many. Um, and
Will
so I just
any
want to
get
start with
anywhere
that.
else?
I
Well,
mean,
the
people were
only the
talking.
only one
Somebody
that
put
we've
the line in the chat as bids uh, east of the Mississippi, strength bids east of the Mississippi at over under 0.5. Now that's crazy. I think the line should probably be 1.5, but that tells you just how strong the West is. That we're basically expecting 8 or 9 of the bids going out to the West.
I mean, you pencil in Tufts, right? Tufts or Vermont. I think that's safe. But where else exactly are you feeling good about a strength bid to the eastern part of the country or the middle of the country? Like Notre Dame, I think, is the next highest ranked team, and they're at 21. So that's a little bit beyond the range you need to be. I talked about Northeastern having the potential. As far as teams in our rankings, Wisconsin, and if both of those Southeast teams were to come together, but like it is hard to dig up teams you feel like are really in the running to win strength bids from the Southeast, the Ohio Valley, the AC, the beyond Tufts in New England, certainly the Metro East, with the loss of their top level talent that they've had. I think it's going to be a tough call for them too. So it's like, where exactly are you counting on like a resurgence from Ohio State? Maybe Pitt, who's a team outside of our top 25. Maybe it's like a Pitt and Penn kind of thing. But like, I mean, it looks like the West is going to dominate, and I really think that it could literally be one strike bid going outside of the Northwest and Southwest. Not even the South Central.
It's wild. It's absolutely wild. Um, and
I mean, when
yet,
we get to the
and
graph and it's
yet,
like 5, 6, and then 1, it's gonna feel weird.
and yet, some of the very best teams are not from the West. You have UNC coming off this incredible streak, multiple titles, the just unbelievable run that they've been on. Uh, can they keep it going? Is this another year where we could see Pleiades take home the championship, Keith?
Well, I wonder if the doubters, are now doubting their doubt, right? After last year, you're like, they got to fall off, right? It's got to be time for regression to hit. It didn't. I mean, if they were a point away from it, it really felt like it was about to get them. But no, back to semis, and then back to the title. Right? They flipped it around. They're still going to be super talented, but like now we're in the post Dawn era. Maybe that's where you talk yourself into. No Dawn. Can they do it without Dawn? I don't know. It can't go on forever, right? You have a good group of contenders this year. So I think that it's very much in jeopardy, as is evidenced by the fact that they're not even number 2 in the power rankings. They're all the way at number 3. So it feels like the years things are lining up not in favor of the Pleiades. But hey, they've had those loading jerseys or loading discs or whatever, that little graphic where it's like all 7 stars. They're trying to get the 7 titles in a row. Uh, maybe that's enough of a motivation. Great design, you
My
know.
God, please no. Um, is this? But then, of course, the sort of the secondary conversation is that is this finally the year for some of these other top programs that have been close, that have been in semis, that have maybe made it to the finals, but have come up short? Can they finally get their title? Because at some point, the window's closing for UBC and Vermont and Colorado. These teams are all in that conversation. Do they have the firepower now to win before they lose too many players and the championship window slams shut?
There's some big graduating groups, particularly for Colorado and UBC. I think that they have to feel like this is our chance. You know, UNC is more vulnerable. We saw that last year, and they've been putting a cap on somebody else's experience. So like, no matter how good your team was, if you couldn't get to that bar, you couldn't take home a title. So uh, these teams have to be really hungry. They've also gained a ton of experience going in there and taking their lumps. I'm sure they're going to be deeply motivated to get through, but that also was not enough last year, right? We saw major collapses from all 3 of those teams. You know, obviously, UBC, you got the injury that you're dealing with to Madison Ong, but they did not play their best at nationals. And Colorado, we know how that story ends when they faced UNC, and then Vermont with the disappointing performance against Stanford. So, like, you also know that these are teams that have struggled to get through in the big moments, even when they're not just face down with like trying to get the title over UNC. So, there's reasons to be concerned about each of their title candidacy, but talent is not one of them.
And final big storyline, Keith. The transfer portal, if you will, is in full effect right now. We've got some big players making a change for grad school or something along those lines, and it feels like it's impacting the division even more than usual. What are some of the key players to keep an eye on and the impact they might have?
Well, you mentioned the biggest name, I think, which is Torrey Gray going from Carleton to UC San Diego. Player of the year, quality player. That's a big ad for UCSD. You get to pair Gray with Abby Schiltz. So that should be a really interesting team, and it wouldn't shock me if they play their way up into being one of the teams that we're talking about as like a semifinals contender. But then you also have Margot Donahue, who's staying in the Southwest, but taking her talents to another school too. So there's also Bella Steedley going from D3 to D1. You've got Fiona Cashin going from Georgia to Colorado. That's a great ad for them. So there's a ton of talent, and there are other players even beyond that going from D3 to D1. We're starting to get rosters rolling in, so we're like seeing more and more of this stuff. But these players are showing up and taking advantage of their 5th, 6th years at other schools, and it's going to make an impact on the overall talent and where it is in the division.
All right, let's take our attention over to the men's side. Big picture storylines. Keith, what do you think stands out as number one on the list?
To me, it's Oregon. It's this Oregon team. You know, they have ascended to number one in our preseason power rankings. They're on the heels of this Rhino Slam title and the strength of Oregon Youth Ultimate in the area. They're coming off the way last year ended. What is that? How does that impact this team this year? They bring back a ton of talent. I mean, this is ego's time. I mean, coming in as the number one team is a big deal for a program that felt like they had taken a couple steps back from being in title contention year in and year out. So is this the return for Ego to being one of the most prominent and dominant programs in the division? And can they go in there and win a title after their disappointing end to last season?
I think it's gonna be quite the story to see if they can maintain, improve upon what they did last year. It can be hard to go out in the manner that they did, but it's just the confidence building that has to have happened this club season with some of the key players who played for Rhino Slam and are coming back. That's a big deal. You know, to have those high level reps in the club division just makes college feel that much easier, and just like you're in more control. Um, and I think the questions are mostly for me around like in that top tier, where are the other teams? We know that UNC is on this wild semifinals streak. It's now a decade long, multiple titles in that span. They're going to be strong again. Are they at risk, though, Keith, of losing the semi streak, or is that not even a question? It's just about whether they get to finals and win another championship.
I mean, it's both. I think that last year they were a breath away from losing the semi streak, so it was as close a call as you can basically get. And then they have such a like we talk about how Oregon season ended last year. I think UNC probably doesn't think as much about that Oregon game because the way that their season ended in semis last year too. I mean, they giving a comeback that has to sting. So maybe they're going to be rededicated after that. Maybe that's going to be a new motivating factor for them. But they know that the target's on their back. I know Oregon's the number one team, but I think everybody's thinking about beating UNC, and that's just the way it is for UNC now. So that comes with the territory. I imagine they're used to that, but it's going to be a tall task continuing this streak.
Yeah, it's just the other teams up at the top feel like they've started to reach talent parity with UNC, which has often been a clearly the most talented team. And they still have a deep, experienced coaching staff, some of the very best players in the division, and maybe we'll look back and say, "Oh, yeah, we should have just penciled them into semis once again." But I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. But it really depends on what we see from teams like Carleton. You know, they feel like they've underperformed their talent for a long time. They now have the best rookie class in quite some time that feels like it's going to set them up to be a top tier program for at least the next 4 years. Um, do they have enough to step up now and make a semis or a finals run or even all the way to a title? Uh, it's so difficult to project just how good these rookies are going to be in their first year of college ultimate.
I mean, the Carleton reputation when you look back at where it is now. I mean, for a while they were like in semis and finals every year. They won multiple championships in kind of that crossover from the aughts into the early 2010s, winning those titles in 2019 or 2009, 2011, and they won that other title in 2017. But the year prior, they didn't make the bracket. The year after, they make semis, and then they miss nationals. Then they don't make the bracket. Then they miss nationals again. Then 2 years ago, there's pre-quarters. Last year, they didn't make the bracket. Like, since that title, they had one semis appearance, and they've missed nationals twice and failed to make the bracket twice. Like, the talent has been there, so it's really a question about, can they exercise these demons? You know what I mean? Uh, they have a extremely talented team, probably on par with the teams that are competing for a title, but it's hard to look at the resume and not think there's something going on that's keeping this team from reaching their potential.
I cannot wait to see it unfold. I feel like they always give us storylines out of Carlton Cut.
I
Um,
I am fascinated by how Axel Olsen's going to translate directly into college ultimate. Like how fast can he become an elite level offensive player? I mean,
he's
I've been
already
out.
there, Keith.
I've said that he is a unique player. I haven't seen a player with this level of throwing acumen in at his age in men's division play before. So I'm curious. Like, is he? It seemed like in the fall they were pretty ready to hand him the keys and be like, all right, let's see what you can
I think
do as the controlling the offense here. Is he going to be like that at nationals?
I have little concern. I think that he's already got the tools. And he's already been taking the toughest matchups at the high school and YCC level for years. So it's not like the defensive skill is going to go up so much that he's not ready for that. I mean, I
What
think the
happened to
challenge will
Mister
be
College is a
playing
whole
against
different ball
bigger.
game.
It is a whole different ballgame, but when you're just when you, what's the thing that he has to be able to do? Get open in the reset space. I think he can do that enough. The throwing is not a problem. I worry more about the pressure, the cutters having to deal with much more physical marks who are like fifth year seniors and they're rookies. But as a pure handler type, I'm actually not too concerned. I think he'll be fine. Um, we already talked a little bit about the Georgia Tech hype. That's certainly going to be something to keep an eye on in the Southeast. How about we've barely even mentioned, we maybe haven't mentioned the name of last year's national champions, Brown. Uh, mention them in the context of Jacques Nissen and Leo Gordon were both gone. How far will this Brown program fall? Do they make nationals, Keith? If you bet right now, do you take them?
I have been the Brown defender. I feel like in the office. I think that they're going to show that they're a little better than people think. That the depth and the system are enough to carry them this year, even without. I think the ceiling is what's been taken away, and I just don't think they can be a lead level team. But I still think they're going to be competitive team. Like that I'm less worried about. I think they've got some solid rookies that they can already start to put into big roles. Jason Tapper and Eli Chang, I think, are going to be kind of the centerpieces of the team. But this is a team that had the system and the stars. Now they have the system and good players, and that's going to make them a good, not great team. So I think Nationals is it something I'm confident in? I'm not putting money on it, but if you made me pick one way or the other, I think I'd pick them to make it.
I say yes as well. I just think coaching's too good. They'll find a way. They'll put new people into the roles. They're certainly not going to be as dynamic as a team. They're not going to win another national championship this year, but I still think that they're going to get out of a admittedly difficult New England regional.
I do think they
Um,
could finish at the bottom of a pool at nationals, but I think they can make it there.
what else stands out for you as big picture storylines, Keith?
Look, I've been singing this song for a couple of years, but like, how good can the Northwest be this year? Like, we know Oregon is going to be a title contender, but the question is, after that, what is can that depth turn into bids, or is it just going to be a 2 bid region, 3 bid region, and everybody's eating each
Six
other's lunch
teams in
when
the
it comes
top
down to it?
30.
Right. Is that where they're destined to be? Because your Western Washingtons, your UBCs, those are unranked teams that we think can hang. But then you got UVic and Washington, and they're trailing behind Oregon State. Like how good can the Northwest be? I don't expect to see the West dominance that we are seeing in the women's division, but the Southwest also has some solid depth. So does the South Central. So if Texas and WashU, who are we think Texas should be a top 15 team, that means 3 top 15 teams in the South Central. How much is left on the table for the Northwest? They're to me kind of the fulcrum of the bid conversation is what happens with the depth in the Northwest.
It's going to be a great season. Email us your thoughts, deeplook@oldtworld.com. You can also drop them in the comments here on YouTube. What are your big picture storylines? What have we missed? We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're getting ready for Santa Barbara Invite, making some picks. We've got our mailbag question of the week as well. Stay with us. It's Deep Look.
I think we both have pretty high spice tolerances. I think we could make it through.
That one's got a little heat.
Yeah, it's sticking with you a little bit. It's hot. It's hot. That's happening. That's happening here.
Nutritional yeast, canola oil.
Oh.
And there's a little ghost pepper powder in there, too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. It's hard to talk. It's hard to talk. Woo.
Welcome to Deep Look Hot Twos.
Pray for us.
Yeah.
All right, welcome back to Deep Look. Santa Barbara Invite coming our way this weekend. It will be live streamed on ultiworld.com for all standard and all access subscribers. We already talked about the women's division lineup and just how stacked it is. The men's side also solid, but it's just not with the strength of the West Coast right now on the women's side. It's just like on another level. But Colorado will be out. Colorado State will be out there in the men's division. Most of the strong teams from the West, of course. Illinois making the trip as well, an interesting team. Going to be in the bid conversation perhaps alongside Michigan and the Great Lakes. And then all of these Utah schools, I'm very interested to see what we see from them. Utah Valley making essentially what feels like a debut at the high level of D1 college.
Yeah, this tournament, like you mentioned, it's not quite as stacked, but the bid conversation starts now, right? I mean, teams have to make their first statements here, and we mentioned the strength in the Northwest. We didn't talk about Utah Valley, but UVic, UBC is there. They got Justin Podnar, so you're already going to start to see what the Northwest has to offer and start to get your pecking order in line, as well as the Southwest. I'm curious to see how Cal looks coming out early in the year, because they're a team that lost a lot, but does have some talent back with you mentioned Dexter Clyburn and Rich Wong. So I'll be very curious to see how the regional level stacks up here. And then, you have a team like Illinois who still has, I'm pretty sure Eli Artebekus is still there. This guy's like a former rookie of the year candidate, and nobody talks about him anymore. I think he's still with Illinois. And I think that they're going to be a connective piece. I don't know what their potential is, but it's possible.
We do not at this moment have a schedule. We're expecting to get a schedule later today, so we don't have pools to look at or anything like that. But Keith, I think we can certainly make our picks. Who do you see making the finals and taking this thing down this year?
I think it's easy to start with SLO making the finals. I will be surprised if you go another direction from there. The question is, do I say Santa Cruz? I think we see an early season hype for Utah. So I'm going to take SLO over Utah, I think, in the final.
Well, that would be some early season hype. Oh boy. Obviously I'm taking SLO. And on the second team, man, I think I'm ready for some early Santa Cruz hype. A lot of buzz. They pushed SLO a little bit in the fall. I could see them getting through to the final here, and no BYU on Sunday. So like, I look around. Sure, we could see one of those Utah teams make a move. There's plenty of other good Northwest teams in the conversation, but I'll give Santa Cruz the Slugs a little love here early. But I got slow taking it down.
I think Santa Cruz is going to be pretty good this year. In fact, I wouldn't
agree.
be surprised if they're better than Utah by the end of the year, but I could see Utah coming out hot. Excitable team.
On the women's side, oh my gosh, I don't even. It's like it's so stacked.
Who do you
it's
think's
hard
going to
even
win
know anything here.
nationals?
Yeah, I know. I'm thinking a little bit about like, do I give some of the California teams a benefit of the doubt because of like they've been playing more, weather a little bit better? I don't know. I think I'm just gonna keep it simple and say Oregon and UBC in the final, and I'll give UBC the win here early in the season.
Interesting. They don't usually come out this early. I think maybe they're going to have kind of sleepy eyes coming out this early. I don't know.
They played this tournament last year.
It's true. It's true. Maybe this is the new norm for them. Maybe they're like, we can't do this start the season in March thing anymore. I want to note, it's compelling to me that Penn is traveling out there. Not because I think that they're going to do that well, but this is what teams that want to do well in May do. It's they're investing in their season. So that's hype. Man.
Reminder that UBC beat Oregon
think,
in this tournament last year, 15-12 in the final. So I'm calling for the repeat, basically.
Yeah, I'm looking at UBC, Oregon, Colorado, and I could see an early season surge from this new look UCSD team. But
I love it.
I feel like Stanford is more likely to start the season slow. That feels like that's very much in their wheelhouse. I'm going to take Oregon over UBC. I think that's where I'll go.
Okay. Last year's semis, by the way, UBC beat Carleton 13-12. Oregon beat Stanford 12-11. The margins are thin, and we might see the same this year. It's going to be an awesome start
this
to
should
the
be a good
season.
tournament.
It's going to be a great tournament. Coverage begins first thing. No, I was going to say Saturday morning. That's a lie. There will be Friday night streams, a little Friday night ultimate to kick off the college streaming season. So that will be, I think, around 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern on Friday night. We don't have an official schedule yet, so keep an eye out on our social media channels for that. But really looking forward to a great year of college streaming.
It's almost always UCSB versus a California team, often slow, or BYU, because the BYU is getting an extra game in before they're done on Sunday. So I think those are the teams that you usually expect to see.
BYU will definitely be playing. The showcase games are at 7 and 8:30 on Friday, and I think maybe somewhere in my email I have the actual teams. But again, the schedule will be out. All right, before we close it out today, it's time for our mailbag question of the week. This one comes from Edward in the Discord. Is the fact that Disc Northwest is working with USAU on college nationals a sign of changing relationships between local disc orgs and USAU? What do you think, Keith?
I'm not really sure. It's a positive, right? I have to come out and say positive. This is a positive sign. Disc Northwest is like basically the biggest local disc org, and their tensions between them and USA Ultimate are well known. Disc Northwest is kind of its own beast. It's so big that they have a bit of a different scale that they're operating on than most LDOs. And so I think that's made their relationship with USA Ultimate unique. And I think that that's led to some of the conflict at the youth level. But it is good to see that the relationships are still good enough that they can make this work, right? I hope that wasn't a reason that there was a delay. It's not my sense that that's the reason there was a delay in the announcement or finalization for nationals. Seems like everybody's pretty positive about excitement about these couple of events. So overall, I think it's a positive sign, but I say that with it like it's not much. This is your trying to cut down on sweets, and you don't need candy for a day. Like, it's good, but there's a lot more to do to get to your goal. The problems are not, can the Dis Northwest host major college events? Like, I just don't think that's really the problem. It's a good sign. The communication's there, that they can partner together. Maybe this will lead to better things down the road, but we've talked about, we need to see meaningful, substantive, systemic change in how USA Ultimate is operating with LDOs. We need to see policy changes.
Yeah. I hear you. I agree, but I think this is a bigger deal than it even may seem. Now, we don't know like what the bids were for this year's college nationals. Maybe this was the only bid. Who knows? But remember, when Minnesota backed out of being like a state-based organization, the first thing USAU did was yank YCCs and put it in Colorado. That was, what, 2 years ago? And it was like horrible bad blood. What are we doing, right, with stuff like that? This is the opposite. This is, we're bringing one of our biggest events of the season, basically number 2 behind Club Nationals, to this Northwest. To me, that's massive. Like that we just haven't really seen this with the major events. They have pretty much been going to the places where there's like a state-based organization or an affiliate or like a TD that they want to work with over and over again. And I have no problem with that. But to me, this is a sign of things going in the correct direction. That doesn't mean that it's all
like your
solved in a day, but I'm feeling optimistic. I'm feeling optimistic about the state of Ultimate going into.
Shouldn't we?
I think we're ready.
Shouldn't we all be? This is the time. It is the week that is going to launch the college season. Everybody's undefeated right now. Everybody's got a shot at winning the title. Yes, you too could go on the miracle run. Like, this is the time for optimism, right? All the things are going to align for your team this year. Your rookies are going to ball out. Everybody's going to stay healthy. Like, your jerseys are all going to arrive on time, and you got them all early, and all the numbers are legible. Nobody has light colors on light background with no outline. Nobody did that this year, right? That's not you.
No one
better not be you. Don't let us catch this.
Now let me tell you this though. If you want to have a chance to win the national championship, you have to like and subscribe. If you don't like and subscribe on this right now, that's it. You're already done.
You're cooked.
You won't make nationals. So brown people they're calling each other. You gotta like and subscribe.
Do you really want to do that to your team? Do you want to be the person who didn't like and subscribe, and then when you miss nationals, you have to tell everybody, "Hey guys, I didn't hit the button." That's all I had to do was hit the button. I didn't hit it.
It's free to hit the button. Just hit the button. All right. That
doesn't mean you will
it.
Make nationals, but it means you're not gonna. It's not because of that you missed.
You're not automatically banished. That's right. Join us for our subscriber bonus segment. It's called Out the Back. It's coming up live in Discord right after this. Keith, I forget if we confirmed our topic for today.
We did not. Do you want to do preseason? We'll stack the regions, power rank the regions.
Oh yeah, we'll do a little chatter within region about like strength bids and who's going and all that. So regional college discussion in the Out the Back segment coming up right after this. For Keith Rayner, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long. We'll talk to you next week right here on Deep Look.
Shout out to the house, Morehouse. I see you.